Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of Musical Musings, airing every Wednesday at 1 p.m. This program is broadcast to you from Rajmakon, University of Technology, Peranakan. And I will be bringing this program to you in two parts. For the first part, we will introduce an artist and a song to you. We'll discuss a little bit about the artist, and then we'll discuss a little bit about the song, some of its background, its main themes, like what it's all about. Then we'll take a break and listen to the song. And for the second part of the program, we will come back and analyze the lyrics. We will take a look at anything that's difficult to understand, difficult vocabulary, slang, idioms, anything like that that might be a little tricky to understand. All right, let's get to the show. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for the Musical Musings program. I am an American English teacher here at Rajmakon, University of Technology, Peranakan. I've been teaching here for a little more than 8 years, and one of the things I sometimes like to do in my classroom is I do like to incorporate music into the classroom. Some teachers like to stick more to the strict, textbook style teaching. We've got to learn that grammar, we've got to learn that vocabulary. But for me, when I think about learning another language, I'm thinking that you want to be able to communicate with people who speak that language natively. And so you have to know how to have a casual conversation. That might mean needing to know some slang words or things like that. As a result, I think it's really good to use things like music or television programs or movies in the classroom. Movies are a little hard. They're long. They take up almost the entire class period. So I don't do that too much. Once or twice, maybe I'll do that here or there. But music is a little bit easier. So that is something that I like to do. I like to include music sometimes. Even then, I don't do it too often. We still have other things we need to do. But occasionally, I will mix in some music into our classroom lessons. All right, so it's natural for me then to be hosting this music program for you. And for today's episode, we are going to be doing a song, Play That Funky Music, by Wild Cherry. Okay, so a little bit of information about the band Wild Cherry. They've been around since about 1970. They're considered kind of a funk rock band. How would I describe funk rock? It's a little hard to even describe, but there's kind of a jazz element to it a little bit. It's kind of a jazz element in there. Okay, and they were formed in, like I said, 1970 in Ohio. They did change their members quite often. In fact, they didn't even last very long. Merab Parisi was their only consistent member from start to finish. And like I said, from start to finish, they weren't around very long. A lot of these bands that we talk about, they were around for decades and decades and decades. A lot of them, even though they're getting old, are still performing now. These guys, no. So they formed in 1970. They didn't come out with their first album until 1976, which is really late compared to some of the other groups that we've done on this program. And then they disbanded in 1979. So only 3 years after their first album, gone. They're kind of a one-hit wonder. Over the last few months, we have been doing a lot of one-hit wonders. We did them consistently for about 2 months, and then we kind of took a break, and we were kind of mixing it up now, just doing whatever we feel like doing, whatever artist or song we feel like doing. It's probably wrong to call these guys a one-hit wonder. They had 5 songs that made the Billboard Top 100 in America. But most of them were low on that list. They still made the list, though. So it's probably wrong to call them a one-hit wonder, but they're close. Because like I said, all of those other songs that made the charts were pretty low. They did have one that got in the top half, barely. I think it was number 45 or 46. The song we're doing today, Play That Funky Music, is really the only one that really did extremely well. So, whether you want to call them a one-hit wonder or not, I would say they probably aren't. But they're close. They're close to qualifying as that. All right. And so, like I said, today's song that we're going to be doing by them is Play That Funky Music. Now, we are keeping the first part of this program a little bit short because there's a lot of lyrics to this song. It does repeat the chorus quite a few times, so there's not a tremendous amount of lyrics. But it's a little bit longer than maybe a few of the songs we've done. So we're just going to talk about the song briefly here before we get into our second half. So again, the name of it is Play That Funky Music. Sometimes people will say, Play That Funky Music, White Boy, because that's the full first line of the chorus. And this came out on their debut album in 1976. Obviously, they don't have a lot of albums. I think they have like 2 more albums after this. But it is still interesting because it's something that I've talked about many times on this channel, that it seems like for a lot of bands, certainly not all of them, we've definitely seen some exceptions, but more often than not, an artist's best song comes out very early in their careers. This was on their very first album. This was their number 1 song. It didn't reach number 1, but I mean number 1 for the band. It reached number 4 in the charts, which is still very good. I've told you many times on this program how the 1970s and 80s were just really filled with a lot of good music and different styles of music. You had a lot of good R&B music, especially in the 70s, and then rock really kind of took over more in the 80s, along with pop music with people like Michael Jackson, and late in the 80s Whitney Houston came along. I mean, just a tremendous amount of music in the 70s and 80s. So getting to number 4 is a pretty big deal. If you were looking at charts from the 1950s, for example, I'm not saying the music wasn't good. There was still a lot of good music back then. But there wasn't really the same diversity of music. There wasn't that same variety. And so, it was easier to get on the charts. Again, not saying the music wasn't good. There's plenty of good songs from the 1950s and 60s. 60s is where it kind of started picking up. 60s had a lot of really good music too. 70s and 80s is really kind of where it peaked. So this got to number 4 or number 5. I thought I remembered it being number 4. I have my notes in front of me. My notes say it peaked at 5. It might have been 5. Either way, it was really high in the charts. Okay, so what is this about? Play That Funky Music, White Boy? Okay. Well, you have to understand kind of the racial divide in music in America at that time. This kind of what they call funk rock, this kind of funky style where it's kind of mixed with jazz. Jazz really came out of the South and around like the New Orleans area, and there's a heavy black influence on that musical culture down there. There's certainly plenty of white guys who are well-known jazz artists. In fact, we just had one pass away just in the last week or so, as I'm recording this, which is in July of 2025. We just had a famous jazz artist, and he's a white guy. So there's plenty of white guys that do a lot of good jazz music. But there's really a huge black influence on that culture. And so when you're talking about the really famous artists of the 1970s, and this is the 1970s, playing this style of music, it's usually going to be black people. And in fact, if you go on YouTube and search on people's reactions to this song, there's a lot of some of you may not know this because I don't know how much time you spend on YouTube, but there's a lot of reaction videos. People react to TV shows or to movies or to music. And there are a lot of reactions to this song. And what's funny is in a lot of them, they're like, oh, I've heard this song. Oh, I know this song. And then they see the video, and the video's got this white guy out front as the lead singer. There are some black band members as well, but the lead singer's a white guy. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's a black guy singing this song, a white guy singing this song. So it's very, the music industry was not very well integrated back then. And so this style of music, people kind of expect to see a black guy, and you get a white guy singing it. And so the song is really about kind of breaking down stereotypes. I will say that some of the lyrics are a little difficult to understand. But clearly, there is some sense that this is different. Like, for example, he's talking about how he used to sing in a rock and roll band. And he talks about, like, trying to get better at what he's doing. And so this wasn't like his original thing that he was doing, but he wanted to do it. And now he's doing it. Here he is with this song. So again, it's kind of about breaking down the stereotypes. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get on to the song. As always, for those of you joining us on YouTube, because of copyright issues, we cannot embed the video here. So we will give you a link in the upper right corner. Please click on that link. And after the video is over, you can just jump back here for the second part of our program. And for any of you who are listening by other platform, by just radio or streaming, we can embed the music, so you should be able to listen just fine. All right, let's get to the song.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So that was Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. I hope you enjoyed that song. It's kind of a fun song. And that's a song that's really about breaking down stereotypes within the music industry. All right, so let's go through these lyrics. It's a little bit of a long song, kind of. Again, they go. I mentioned in the first part, they do go through the chorus several times, and the chorus is quite long. And so we only have to do the chorus one time when we're talking about here. So it's not that long of a song as far as the lyric breakdown, but it's on the longer side. So let's get right to it. So we start out, hey, once I was a boogie singer playing in a rock and roll band. Okay, so boogie is kind of a style of music that would be, that's hard to even describe because we don't really use that term anymore. It's almost more like this funky style music, like the jazz infused. It's almost a little bit like disco as well. But he's in a rock and roll band. You know, like the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin, or if you go back further, would be like the Beatles, or, you know, a band like that. So just kind of your standard music. I never had no problems burning down the one-night stands. Okay, so what does he mean there? I will admit that this line's a little hard to understand. What does he mean by burning down the one-night stands? All right, we usually use the term one-night stand to refer to someone who you meet up with, to make love with for just one evening. That's not what he's talking about here. That I'm pretty sure about. I think what he means is their performance. So when he says burning it down, I think he means doing a great job. We kind of use the phrase being on fire to mean that you're doing something great. So he's burning down the one-night stands. In other words, I never had no problems burning down the one-night stands. So in other words, he was really good at what he did in the rock and roll band. But he is suggesting that he didn't really fit. He's more of a boogie singer. Okay, so then we continue along, and everything around me got to start feeling so low. And I decided quickly, yes I did, to disco down and check out the show. Okay, so here you see he mentions the disco. Like I said, boogie, disco, they're kind of close. They're kind of similar. I would say boogie might be a little bit more jazz feel to it, but they're similar. They're similar. In fact, there are some disco songs that have the word boogie in them, like Boogie Nights is a really famous disco song. So you can see what he's saying here. Everything around me got to start to feeling so low. When you say something is feeling low, how do you feel low or high? What that means is sad. You're feeling down. You're feeling sad. So he's not liking what he's doing. He has no problem. He's burning down the one-night stands. He's got no problem. Does it well. It's not his style. Not his style. He doesn't like it. So he's feeling low. So then he decided quickly, yes I did, to disco down and check out the show. So in other words, he's going to go perform disco music. Now, I will say that funk rock is not really disco. This is not a disco song. There is sort of a disco feel to it a little bit. That kind of bass line you hear in there, that's kind of we would maybe say back in the 70s, that was groovy. That was a groovy bass line, and that's kind of got a disco feel to it. Like I said, funk rock is kind of like with jazz in there, maybe even a little disco. So yeah, it's leaning more that way. It's clearly not straight up rock. Okay? It's not like, this is not a song, for example, that a band like the Eagles or the Rolling Stones or anyone like that would perform. No. This is has more of a disco element to it. Okay, now we get to the chorus. Yeah, they were dancing and singing and moving to the groovin'. And just when it hit me, somebody turned around and shouted, "Play that funky music, white boy." Okay, so they're dancing and singing. Okay, that's easy enough. And moving to the groovin'. Moving to the groovin'? What does that mean? Okay, so a groove. This is an old term. We don't really use this much anymore. But a groove back then would be like a song that has a good rhythm to it. So they're moving to the groove. In other words, they're dancing to the song. The song's got a nice beat, a nice rhythm. It's easy to dance to. They're dancing and singing and moving to the groovin'. So it's a good song with a good beat to dance to. And just when it hit me, so I'm not sure what he means there, when it hits him. I guess he's realizing that people like this, are liking this music. And he's the one that's performing it. So he's like, oh, wow, okay, good. And somebody turned around and shouted, "Play that funky music, white boy." And so it's a funny line. It's a funny line because you usually don't see like racial references in music like this. And it almost sounds offensive. It almost does. The first time you hear this song, you're like, oh, really? Ew. It's not meant that way at all. In fact, it's meant complimentary. They're telling him to play that funky music. In other words, he's doing a great job. Play it, play it, play it. Play that funky music. And they're pointing out that he's a white boy because they're not used to seeing the white guy up there playing this kind of music. So play that funky music, white boy. Play that funky music right. So they're telling him to do it right. Play that funky music, white boy. Lay down that boogie. So again, boogie is kind of that style of music. It's disco style, kind of. And play that funky music till you die. In other words, just keep going. Keep going till you die. Okay? So now the next verse, this is where it starts sounding like, even though they're with him, they're rooting for him, play that funky music. Remember, the first verse, he was in a rock and roll band. He's not used to doing this. This is a new thing for him. He maybe hasn't mastered it yet. Okay? So it continues on. I tried to understand this. I thought that they were out of their minds. How could I be so foolish to not see I was the one behind? So this is a little confusing because it almost makes it sound like when they're telling him to play that funky music, they're like demanding it because he's not doing it. I don't think that's really true. I think they're trying to encourage him to do it. Usually when a line like that, play that funky music, means they're encouraging you to do it. The reason I say it sounds like maybe they're demanding it, like because he's not doing it. Because he's saying, how could I be so foolish to not see I was the one behind? So he doesn't quite get it yet. And he didn't realize that right away, which is why he starts out, I tried to understand this. I thought that they were out of their minds. So what are they yelling for? Why are they yelling? And then he realizes he needs to be more funky. He needs to really get into the music. Okay, so we continue on. So still I kept on fighting. Well, losing every step, by the way, we can do. I said I must go back there. I got to go back and check to see if things still the same. So in other words, he keeps fighting. He keeps trying to improve. Although it does say he's losing every step, by the way. So he's having trouble keeping up with this type of music. But he wants to go back. I said I must go back there. I got to go back and check to see if things still the same. So he wants to go back. Okay, then we get the chorus. And then we get just kind of one line that's kind of spoken. Gonna play some electrified funky music. Hey, wait a minute. And now we get to the next verse. And this is the last verse. Like I said, we do repeat the chorus a lot. So it's not too long of a song. This third verse is really the last one. And then they just repeat part of the chorus. Well, they do the chorus again, but then they repeat part of it. Okay, so now first it wasn't easy changing rock and rolling minds, and things were getting shaky. I thought I'd have to leave it behind. Okay, so now it seems like he feels good enough about himself, but you got to change the minds of people that like rock and roll. There was kind of a battle in the 1970s between rock and roll and disco. Personally, I think it's silly because I think both types of music bring their own different sort of energy. I love them both. Disco ended up losing. It went really out of fashion around 1979, 1980, 1981, and rock and roll took over. But there's plenty of fun disco songs. Disco songs are fun. They're fun. So I don't know why there's such this battle between rock and roll and disco, but there was. You liked one or the other, you couldn't like both. Which again, silly. It's silly. So he's gonna. So now that he's now doing on the disco side, the boogie side, the funky side, he's trying to change the minds of the rock and rollers. So changing rock and rolling minds. Things were getting shaky. When you talk about something getting shaky, it means you're not sure about it. That's how we use that word. When you say things are getting shaky, it means things are getting uncertain. He doesn't know how this is going to go. All right? So I thought I'd have to leave it behind. To leave something behind it doesn't mean literally. I mean, we're talking about music. He doesn't have something physical that he's leaving behind. No. What it means here is you just stop doing it. So he's worried that he can't do this anymore because it's having trouble changing the rock and rolling minds. Then we continue on. Oh, but now it's so much better. I'm funking out in every way, but I'll never lose that feeling of how I learned my lesson that day. Okay, so what he's saying here is that he's a lot better. He's funking out in every way. That's not really a phrase we use, but you understand what he means, right? Because it's funky music. So funking out in every way, it means he's really into the music. So now he's finally succeeding. And he'll never lose the feeling of how I learned my lesson that day. In other words, he's talking about back in that second verse there when they were yelling at him, or it's actually the first chorus where they're telling him to play that funky music. So he's there, whether they're encouraging him or being negative, I guess you can still ask that question based on the second verse. I think they're encouraging him. But however you interpret that second verse there, either way, it's a lesson. It's either a lesson that he needs to be better if they're yelling at him to play the music they want to hear, or it's a lesson that, breaking down the stereotypes, which is kind of the idea that I have for this song, that they want him to do it. They want him to do it more. That's why we have the line here where it says, I'm funking out in every way. He's really into it now. They wanted more from him. More. And so now he's giving them more. So it's kind of a happy song too, right? Because now he's successful. He's a little bit worried, again. He does say in this same verse, things are getting shaky. Thought I'd have to leave it behind. But he does say, oh, but now it's so much better. So he's at least doing better. Whether or not he's got the rock and rolling minds moved over, it's unsure. Given the time that this song came out, he probably did have the rock and roll minds come over, because this would have been near the peak of disco around 1976. Mid-70s would have been the peak of disco. Mid to kind of later 70s, although, like I said, by the end of the 70s, it was already starting to die out a little bit. All right, then we get the chorus, and then we repeat part of the chorus over again. And that's the song. All right, so that is Wild Cherries, Play That Funky Music. Now, as for other songs by Wild Cherry, I always do this at the end of the episode, give you some other songs to listen to from some of these bands. As I said, they're sort of a one-hit wonder. This is really their only big hit. They did have a few others. Baby Don't You Know, Hold On With Strings. Those are a couple other ones you can maybe go listen to. But really, this song was their only big song. But again, I don't think you'd call them a one-hit wonder. They had 4 other songs that made the charts. These 2 that I just mentioned were, I think, the top 2 of those other 4. One of them only barely made the charts. It was like 95, 96. The chart is only the top 100. I think it's Baby Don't You Know got up to 40-something. So I don't have a lot of other songs for you to listen to. However, what you may want to listen to instead is just listen to this song again. But like I said, go watch some of the reactions on YouTube, and you'll understand what I mean about kind of how music was segregated back then. And so styles of music were played and performed by certain types of people. And this style of music, back then, they wouldn't expect to see a white person performing. So it's kind of funny to see some of the reactions. All right. So again, that's Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. All right, and that's going to be it for today. Thank you for joining us for today's Musical Musings program. I would encourage any young people out there who are looking to go to university to check out our university here at Rajamacon, University of Technology, Puranicon. We have a really nice university here. And otherwise, Please stay with us and tune back in next week for another great song. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Musical musings, musical